Hey y'all, curious minds, open hearts, you're in the right place. This is Spill the Spirituality. Each week we hang out in the space between what we think we know and what we don't know, and all the ways that people are trying to make sense of that gap, with or without religion, with or without labels, with or without any kind of certainty. Whether you're deeply devout or spiritually curious or just here for a good chat, think of us as a slightly opinionated, occasionally lost, but always well-meaning sat-nav. I'm Trey Hall. I'm a Methodist minister, a Tennessean living in London, a Labrador dad, and a book addict. And my co-host, the wonderful Jazz Amplifar, isn't here today. She'll be back in future weeks. But together, over the past 4 years, we've been exploring this whole spirituality thing. And each week, we bring you honest chats, fresh perspectives, and the occasional hot take from travelers figuring it out as they go along. And today, we're delighted to be joined by the man who brought us this electric moment from Traitors Series 2.
Harry, please reveal, are you a faithful or are you a traitor?
I am, and since the start, being a traitor. Oh my fucking God. Oh my God.
You have played an extraordinary game. You now stand in front of that entire pot of gold, 22 years old, and you beat everyone. Well done. Are you happy?
Yeah, I can't believe it.
I bet you've heard that 1,000 million times.
It gives me goosebumps every time I hear it.
What was it like to go from your girlfriend's Instagram, I think, or TikTok, to being rung up and saying you should be on the show, and then, like, you know, a few months later, winning the jackpot as a
Yeah,
twin?
it was absolutely mental. That if someone told you to dream the most impossible dream you could ever dream, then dream it. A dream that's so far out of reach, so far out of touch, that you dream it and it actually happens. I think it was the best thing that's ever happened to me. That's why I am where I am today, because I'm just grateful for the people who loved, who watched, and who continue to want to see more from me, really.
And that's clear that lots of people do. And now you've got this new series. And in this new series, the prize isn't a pot of gold. It's the potential for an audience with the Pope. How did that come about?
When I went into the Traitors, I never expected anything to happen. I was a kid who was in the army and a kid who only heard about the Traitors because of an Instagram message that I actually thought was a scam. So luckily I ever replied to it, because I got this message on Instagram. I was private on everything because obviously, again, I was in the military, so you have to be private. Never used social media before in my life. And I was laying there, this message came through and I thought, no thanks, this is a scam. And she's, no, Harry, I promise you this is a real person. And I just thought to myself, that's what any scammer would say.
That's what they all say. The catfishers all say that.
So I was like, I'm not giving you my bank details. And then luckily she left her number and her email address. And obviously I showed Anna, my partner, and she was like, if this is a scammer, they're not going to leave their personal number. So I was there laying in my room, and luckily I just took that chance to ring that number. And again, this is where I'm coming on to. Even when I called the number, I'd never seen the Traitors. I'd never seen Series 1. And she spent hours explaining the game. And I was like, oh yeah, this sounds good. Like, I'm good at every game, really. And then right at the end, she goes, oh yeah, and by the way, 2-hour conversation, she goes, there's a prize pot, including money. And I thought, hold up, now my ears are tingling. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, yeah, you can win up to 120 grand. And I was like, Kate, why did you not tell me that at the start? Because you would have saved yourself 2 hours. I was like, I'm in. Tell me what I need to do next. I'll do a lot worse for 120 grand.
You had no idea even what Traitors was, right?
Yeah. No,
and
exactly.
then you find yourself winning it.
That's why where I come on to, like, I didn't expect anything to happen anyway. Because I'd never seen anything from the Traitors or seen any of the people who had been on the Traitors, I went there with such true intention to go there to be a traitor. Because firstly, I said to her, if I'm not going to be a traitor, there's no point in sending me up there. You know, I'm not like a massive fan of the show. I'm sure there's someone else who wants to be a faithful. But in my life, I say I live a very Jekyll and Hyde life. You know, Monday to Friday, I was Corporal Clark. And as soon as it hit the weekend, I was Harry from Slough and didn't think about work until it was Monday again. So I said, honestly, there's no point in you sending me up there if I'm not going to be a traitor, because like I said, I live my life being trustworthy, faithful, loyal to everyone every day. I'm bored of it. Let me get in trouble a little bit, you know? So I was like, I had never seen anything come from the show. I was in such a happy point in my life, you know, where I'd sort myself out mentally, spiritually and physically, that the only reason I went onto the show was to get a foot in the door. You know, the cost of living crisis. How was I ever going to move out of my council house, you know? Me and Anna wanted to take that next step, and that's why I went onto the show, to try and win the money, to better the lives of not just me and her, but my family too. And I'd actually set myself up with a job to work on the trains. So when the show had come out, I was still in the army at the point, so I'd gone back to the army, because obviously you had to wait a couple of months for it to come out, and it was the weirdest experience of my life, because then when it did start coming out, I was still very much like, nah, like, this is a bit crazy, but I'm still going to go and work on the trains. You know, I only ever done it so I could go around my granny's house and say, oh, granny, stick the TV on, look, here's your surprise. And then I thought that would be it. After finishing the Traitors, obviously, you know, you do the bit of press, and a few people wanted to speak to me because I had won the show, and I was like, this is really cool. This doesn't really mean anything though, like it will all end. Next week I'll be back on the building site. And I was picked up by an Uber driver from Slough, funny enough, taking me into London to do a few like podcasts and interviews and stuff. And I remember the Uber come round the back with my bags, and he's jumped out, and I was like, oh bloody hell, you know, this is Slough. So I thought he's going to nick my bags and got like, what have I done? I was like, I haven't done anything. And he was like, no, we need a selfie. And I was like, oh yeah, of course mate. So we took a selfie, we got in the car, and that's when we started chatting, and we chatted the whole way to London. And, you know, he said, I'm sorry about that. He was like, I just need to send it to my family chat. And I was like, yeah, of course. And basically he went on to tell me that, like, he had a son who was my age, so early 20s. He had a son who was 14 to teenager years. He had his dad who lived with him, so 3 generations of his family. His teenage son just played Fortnite and sat in and gamed. His younger son, that's my age, just went out all the time. And his dad didn't really speak much. He said, but the Traitors was the one thing on a Friday where it brought all of them generations of lads to the sofa, and they kept all 3 episodes. They watched it on that Friday and ordered in a takeaway. And I was like, oh, this is great. And then he said, you need to carry on. He was like, because now my kids, like, they can resonate with you. You're a council kid from Slough who's going on to do whatever you want to do and show that you can do whatever you want to do. And now my kids want to do whatever they want to set their mind to. So then when he said that, I really thought about the idea of, actually, where can I go next with this? And then luckily I did, because here we are 2 years later.
Here we are. I just want to say I work on a team of people who care about spirituality and working around spirituality across the nation and sharing faith, sharing exploration of God with different people. And 2 folks on the team, when Series 2 was happening, we actually did this game around Traitors and spirituality. And 2 of my team, one a woman and one a man, both had crushes on you. I won't name them. I will. Holly and Allie, who's straight. Allie had a man crush, and Holly sort of had a crush. So anyway, you were compelling for many watchers. So just FYI, shout out to Holly and Allie, who will probably be embarrassed that I just told that story.
Saying that makes me feel a lot better, because it was the same when the show came out. I was so worried that the whole nation would hate me, but luckily
no,
everyone seems to think I was still very much faithful. Paul, who's a good friend of mine now and I was in the show with, he was obviously one of the other Traitors. Hard to miss. He's tall, ginger, walks around like a highlighter, and he was massive. So everyone remembers Paul, and he was like the evil traitor. And it's funny because when we were going to London, we'll speak to people, and people will be like, oh, Harry, love what you did on Traitor Series 2. You was amazing. And then they look at Paul and go, oh, Paul, you're just a bit of a knob. And then he's there like, he would look at me and go, he was literally worse than me. He
was the worst guy,
yeah. But it's nice that people feel that way.
I want to get onto your new show in a second, but something you said about being Jekyll and Hyde and your life, like in the army, 5 days a week, you'd be this kind of guy, and the weekends you'd be normal Harry from Slough. Did you really experience it as 2 different people, or was it the same person? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, do you know what? I like it that way too. Like, you can be obsessed with your work. I'm obsessed with my work now, to the point where when I'm sleeping at night, it's like, what can I do next? Who can I try and meet next? What can I film that everyone will want to see? What ideas do I have? So it's nice, I think, to have that Jekyll and Hyde switch, because you don't let it consume you. And I think sometimes you have to enjoy life first before really enjoying work. And it was like that Jekyll and Hyde switch was mainly because when I was in the army, I wasn't enjoying it as much. So I would keep my army work to myself, which was, say, the Henry of me, and then the Harry was the one that would enjoy life over the weekend. But now I've got to a point where, I love my work that I get to do every day. I'm really grateful, but I still live that Jekyll and Hyde life, because I could be invited somewhere crazy like the BAFTAs, and I'm walking like a red carpet with all these celebs who I watch on TV and I think this is mental. And then at the end of it, I get a taxi home to my council house in Slough, where I can just be Harry again. So I still always have that Jekyll and Hyde, and I quite like it because, like I said, it gives you a switch off from work. even though I say I'm bad at taking my own advice, and normally I don't really switch off, but it does allow you to have that side of, okay, this is work mode, and then now this is actually enjoying life mode, you know?
Yeah, it seems to me like you, as you just said, you're leaning in now to this season in your life where those things might merge a little more, where Harry from Slough is actually the same Harry that's on this, you did the pilgrimage show, but now like pilgrimage to Rome. Tell us about this show. You're not just playing a character. This is actually you, right? You are actually interested in going to Rome and trying to meet up with the Pope. Tell us, like, where did that come from?
It's funny you say that, because it's probably what I'm most nervous for this show, you know, Harry Clark Goes to Rome, because it's like a vulnerable side of me. I'm not just on a TV or a reality show. This documentary is filmed as if it's filmed off the side of my shoulder. So there's a lot of trust involved, because Johnny, the director, who's amazing, I was still very scared because he's coming to my house in Slough, where I live with 5 brothers and sisters, my mum and dad. 2 of my sisters were having an argument. The dogs were barking. My mum and dad, who was doing something downstairs that was mad. The washing machine was going crazy. And then my little brother had a nosebleed. So it's really vulnerable show of you seeing actually I am just a normal person, and it's quite nice as well, because it's probably the most authentic thing I'll ever do. I could have, when I finished the Traitors, take this show, take that show, and don't get me wrong, I've taken every opportunity I've got in a smart way with both hands, but I haven't just dropped the needle at, say, the first thing that was offered to me. I've wanted to do things that resonates with people and something that's authentic to me as well. So personally, for the Harry Clark Goes to Rome, it's because I'm Catholic. I grew up in a Catholic family. My mum made us go to church when I was little. And then I've gone through times in my life of where my faith was weaker. You know, I say it's like a wave. And it was really tested, challenged when I was in the army. Then I went on to the pilgrimage after all of the Traitors year happened, and it was crazy. That made me go so much deeper into my faith and think, you know what, I am on the right track. But after that, the idea of the show, I mean, if you want the original story, it's the best story ever, because I was actually on the pilgrimage. So when I came up with this show, it was like you
were on the BBC pilgrimage.
I was on the BBC pilgrimage, and I was sat in the middle of the Alps somewhere, random, and I was sat in a pilgrim hostess's house. She didn't speak a word of English. She only spoke German, and we're in this barn. So literally, I was sleeping next to a horse, and I got bad hay fever. But we were down there, and I was sat with Tom, which is one of the producers. And we're sat there on this table. We finished filming for the night, and we got Google Translate out, and we're having a few laughs with this woman. She was really nice, bless her. And she basically said to us in Google Translate, oh, by the way, this valley in the winter is covered with snow, so we have to finish everything that's here, food, drink, everything, before the winter. Otherwise, we just miss out and we lose it. So anyway, she goes, I've got these as a present. Comes in with these home-brewed beers. So it was the best news ever. So we're sat there, and she's made us these home-brewed bottles of beer that have to all be gone by winter, and she gave us 2 trays and was like, have as many as you want. We've sat there and done them all, I think. So we're sat there chatting to each other, and that's how it went, like normal 2 friends in a pub. And me and Tom are sat there in the middle of the Alps, and he's like, what do you want to do next? And I said, Tom, how long have you got? Because I've got this idea. I want to film this for the army. Obviously the army's a big part of my life, and I want to help people who feel lost in the army. On top of that, I want to help people who struggle with mental health, because I've been through there, and then faith has saved me through that. And he said to me, yeah, but as a Catholic, what would you want to do next? And I'd never really thought of it, but being on the pilgrimage, like I said, it deepened my faith. However, when I was there, it was like, I'm still a modern Catholic. I don't really believe in the church because of everything that's gone on, and like, how can I trust something like that's had so many scandals, let's say, and also I believe the church is within, so why do I need to go to the church on a Sunday? I can be just as close to God on the end of my bed as I can be going to church and giving money to church or whatever like that. So it was like, I didn't necessarily believe in the old ways of the Catholic religion as I saw it at that point. Yeah. And I was like, so I guess I'll just go to Rome, meet the Pope, and ask him all these hard questions. And
ask the most important person.
Yeah, because he nudged me, and I was like, technically, if I was in school and I had a problem with what a teacher was teaching me, or like a cover teacher, where would I go? I'd just go to the head teacher. The guy or the woman who runs the whole school. Just go
Same in the army. Same in the army.
Yeah,
go right to the general.
So that was where the mad idea came from.
I love that idea, and I love the chutzpah of it. Why talk to I know you did talk to your childhood priest, but why start with the childhood priest or the Catholic sister or the Catholic mom? Let's go right to the Pope, the Pontiff of Rome. I am a Protestant Christian, and for those of you who are listening who don't know the difference, we're all Christian, but there are just different tributaries in the river of Christianity. But I have always loved the Catholic tradition and have been really influenced by it. And this past summer, my niece Kinley, my husband Jonathan and I said, when you graduate from high school, she's American, like I am, we'll take you on a trip anywhere you want to go. So she came to London for a few days. We had a great time. And she said, I want to go to Rome. She wanted to go because it's a beautiful city. But we went, and I was like, if we're going to Rome, Pope Leo had just been elected. It was like a few weeks later. And I was like, we're going to go to the audience in St. Peter's Square. And so I waited in a queue for 3 hours to get tickets to this thing. And at the end of the day, we got to the very, very back of the audience, like the very back of St. Peter's Square. And I thought, oh, this is really shit because we're not going to be able to see anything. But we're there, and he comes out. It's a beautiful June day in Rome, sunny. It's masses, hundreds of thousands of people. And they clear a little pathway for the Pope mobile to come by, and it's right by us. So the Pope comes by, and I have to say, like, I'm not a Catholic, so I don't have a sense of connection to the Pope in the way that you might, but I respect the guy as a human being, and obviously he's from Chicago, and I used to live in Chicago, so I'm like, oh, amazing. But there was something so beautiful in the crowd as he came by that I was just like, I wonder, something's happening for these folks who are Catholics and maybe not Catholics. There is a real connection to something that I don't register because I'm not a Catholic. What is it about the Pope for you that was so summoning?
It's the weirdest thing ever to explain, because like you said, I remember on the very first day when we actually got to Rome, we went to one of his Sunday blessings where he comes to the window, and even just that, it's the sense of calmness that he gives to everyone. And I don't know why or what it is, but it's not like he's, like, say, a big celebrity or a superstar. Because actually, if you look at the Catholic faith, most of the time, the Pope is the most humble out of everyone. He would still wash your feet and my feet. And I think it just shows a level of realness. Like in the Catholic Church, that actually we're following someone who would clean my feet and I would clean his. He's not someone who puts himself on a pedestal, which is quite ironic to say because obviously he's standing at the top of
obviously
the
he's the head of a church of 3 billion people.
Yeah, exactly. But like, it's just one of the weirdest things. I can't even explain it really. It's just a sense of calmness that he gives everyone.
What was it like when you finally got to Rome? So you'd been like planning this. I saw a trailer for the show where you actually were ringing up the Vatican and they hung up on you basically.
Yeah.
But after that, you make it to Rome. What was it like entering this kind of the eternal city?
I joined the army to travel the world, and funny enough, every time I got deployed with the army, I was just in a UK base or abroad. So it was just basically England, but somewhere else with better weather. So when it was like, I could get the chance to go to Rome, even that in itself was amazing, and I was so grateful for. And then on top of that, I got to take my mum. So obviously my mum's probably one of the biggest and most influential spiritual figures I have in my life, because I only went to the church to not disappoint her. But when I talk about, obviously when I went through the army and I went through my mental health stage where I really struggled, I went to my mum and I was like, I've used up all my resources here. I don't know where to turn. I don't know what to do. I feel like a burden on everyone else. And she said, Harry, what's the one thing you know how to do? Just pray. And then that was where it really switched for me. So then being able to do like a full circle moment, bring it back to my faith and to go to Rome to deepen my faith, but not only go by myself, but to be able to take my mum was amazing. So as the two of us have turned up to Rome, even when, I mean, you've been, and even walking the streets, we had neck ache for the first few days because we're just looking around. This is amazing. And it's things like that, funny enough. I know people probably wouldn't agree, but to me, when I'm walking around Rome or a city with that much beauty, and you're going inside St. Peter's Basilica and things like that, and you're looking up on the wall and you're seeing all the art and you're seeing like the depiction of the Last Supper and things, I'm just looking, like, to me, that's just like, this all can't be for nothing. There's no way there's a geezer in the world who's this persuasive and convinced the whole world that he's the son of God, and it's not true. You know, even just walking around, seeing the art, seeing the relics, it's just like breathtaking, really.
Yeah, I love that. When you were imagining yourself walking into this city, which, I mean, I was there in June, the light is so beautiful. The city feels like a space that hits up against heaven to me. And obviously I'm a Christian, so I'm going to have some contact with that story, but it's just so aesthetically and spiritually beautiful. What was on your list of things to ask the Pope? What did you want to know?
Yeah, so I had so many questions. I think I've got a video of me somewhere about 10 months ago of me saying at 3 a.m, I'm going to meet the Pope one day and I'm going to ask him this, I'm going to ask him that. So I had this idea for ages and these questions for ages. But if I was to meet him, the one thing on my mind, I had so many questions, even just down to the fact of, is there such a thing as a good or bad Catholic? I'm a young guy in my 20s. Let's be real. What do you think any guy who's in his 20s gets up to? I drink, I smoke, I do stuff outside of marriage. Let's be real. But for me to do that and be honest about that, surely I can't just do that every week, then go to church on a Sunday, say sorry, and then do it all again next week. Surely that makes me a bad Catholic compared to someone who devotes their life to God. So how do I live with the idea of the Catholic guilt that everyone goes on about, or the good or bad Catholic idea?
It's not just Catholic either.
Just
Lots of us Protestants too, also like, I have this vision for my life that I know is right, but I keep failing.
Yeah.
And I speak as someone who, I feel the same way.
Yeah, so I really wanted to knuckle down on is there such a thing as a good or bad Catholic? Because then that leads me to, technically, you could be the worst human being in the world. You could murder thousands of people, millions of people, and then at the end of your life repent, and then you're technically saved, which doesn't make sense to me, because then what's the point? What's the point in all of this? So it was like asking them questions. So many of my friends are gay, and we try and speak about like faith, and they always say to me, oh, I would never be allowed in a church, or God won't love me because I'm gay. And it's, who's told you that? Because there's such a misconception. So it's going to try and hopefully meet him and say, is the church for everyone? Or is there something against people like that? Because if there is, then I'm technically not Catholic, because I don't believe in that. I believe that faith is a very personal connection, and whether you have the church or not, faith is just good that you've got it in your life. And like I said, it's a personal relationship between you and God. There is no middleman. So how does the church deal with that? Is the church modernising? Do we still believe in the Bible? Do we still believe in the Bible word for word? Because that still doesn't make sense. Don't get me wrong, I had all these good questions, but then at the same time it was like, what's your favourite emoji? Do you use your Instagram? Can you follow me on Instagram? Because that'd be the coolest thing ever. So it was like, I went there with a bunch of questions, don't get me wrong, different ends of the spectrum too.
And this is why it's good television, and not just good television. This is why it's good. It's a good story, right? Because I think loads of folks have questions. This is what this podcast is about, the deep questions we wrestle with. But people also are interested in little small, ridiculous things of life, like how we write our text. I mean, what kind of music do you like? And it's been really cool to see people from Chicago, where I was a minister for years, like so proud, even if they're not Catholics, even the conservative, liberal, all across the theology spectrum, they're coming to Rome and then bring in like things from Chicago, like bringing Bulls jerseys, bringing like Chicago pizza, bringing Chicago hot dogs. And it's really cool. So that kind of stuff is like part of life. And I love that the story, it sounds like, captures that. One of the things that I saw when I was doing my research for the podcast today was there's this place where you're really thinking about what it means to be good and bad, or what it means to be a human being that's trying to grow and change and repent, as you say, which means it's such a scary word, but all repent means is to turn around and go the other direction. And so you're trying to do this, or you're grappling with that, and you make a decision, I think, to go to confession.
Yeah.
Now tell us, for the folks who don't know what that is, tell us what is confession?
Well, I won't tell you my sins, let's be real.
Don't, you could if you want. No, don't tell us your sins. But what is...
So yeah, confession is something you do as a Catholic, where you go to the church and you'll basically speak to the priest, and confession is you're basically repenting against all of the sins you have done, or everything you've done in your life that doesn't make you happy, basically, or something that's weighing you down. And the reason you speak to the priest is because technically, when I was there in Rome, you realise that the priest, it's weird to imagine, but you imagine that the priest isn't there. The priest is just like the phone line between you and God. So you go there in a very secluded box, or you sit there just with the priest and you get to speak. It's kind of like therapy. You get to tell him all of the sins or things you feel bad for, or things you want to be saved from, basically, and things you want off your consciousness that's really weighing you down. But you're telling God, essentially, because that's how I like to believe in it now, that the priest isn't there and they can't judge. And who are we to judge as humans anyway? So that was what was really nice to learn when I was there. And then afterwards, obviously, God doesn't speak to you directly, but he speaks to you through the priest, as in he will let you know your salvation, or what they call it is like what saves you from them sins. And they'll tell you to go and say, I don't know, I wouldn't say I clearly got about 100 Our Fathers and 100 Hail Marys, and he was looking at me like, this guy needs saving. But no, then they'll basically just tell you to say a prayer in whichever way they do. And then it's just a really nice moment, because you feel freed. And then I hadn't been to confession for 10 years.
Okay.
Which was mental. So you can imagine the amount of sins I had stacking up.
The difference between confession at age 12 and the confession at age 22. That's a lot. That's a 10 years that are rich with change, isn't it?
Definitely. And because when I was 12, I would lie all the time anyway, funny enough. I was born for the Traitors, wasn't I? This is my biggest thing about confession. I'm not going to go to my local church and tell my local priest what I've been up to during the week, and then he say good morning to me and my mum the next day, while he's looking at me going, I need to stay away from this guy. So it was like, that's all I always felt, and that's how I feel a lot of people think, is why would I go to my local priest, and then they already know everything about me, know my family, and then now they're going to know my deepest, darkest secrets. Doesn't really make sense. So when I was like 12 going to confession, it was like, I'm just going to say what everyone else says. Oh, sorry, I blasphemed, or I swore this many times. That's it. Okay, how many Our Fathers, how many Hail Marys? And when I got to speak to him, and I thought, I'm in Rome, I'll probably definitely go to Rome again, but I might never see this priest again. I went to a random church on a random street with a random priest who I'd never met. And funny enough, he was from America. And I just got to sit there and talk to him this whole time. And he gave me my repentance, and I obviously said it. And it was the weirdest feeling ever of the freedom and the weight that was lifted off my shoulders.
Thank you for talking about it. And I think people who are religious of many traditions and not people who are human will be able to identify with that feeling of longing, whether they've done it or not, longing to offload the shit that is on our shoulders. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'm not a Catholic. One of the things I think is a problem, in my opinion, with lots of Christian churches is we don't do confession. Or we might confess to God at the beginning of worship, but we don't have to tell another human being. And I think there's something really spiritually mature about confession as you just described it. Because I love that idea, like the priest is a telephone line to God. That is such a cool way of thinking about it, because the priest is there, but he's not. And the point is you're telling God this stuff, the priest. But I'm an AA, and we don't call it confession in Alcoholics Anonymous, but there's a step in the spiritual 12 steps where you have to write down everything you've done, step 4. And then in step 5, you tell it to another human being that you trust. Could be a priest, could be your sponsor, could be a best friend, but it has to be a living human being that you're sitting next to. And we say in AA, you really haven't told God something unless you've told another human being the stuff. And I think that's exactly what I heard you say about the telephone line. The telephone line is just make sure that you're actually telling it to God. Yeah. Because unless another human being has witnessed that and heard that and held that, in this case, in a place of love and compassion and forgiveness, you really haven't probably said it to God unless you've said it to another human being. That's what I heard you saying.
Well, yeah, and I think it's funny because most people who have faith in their life, for me especially, you see God work through people anyway. So when you see it at day-to-day life and everyone, like me, how I try and be nice all of the time, I try and help people, that's just God working through me. And all of the work I do now is God working through me. So when I to look at confession now, it's because that person who I'm talking to or that priest I'm speaking to, God is working through them. So it's like God's there in the flesh for me now. And I know it might sound weird to a lot of people, but yeah, it's just like having that courage to say it out loud. And then the freedom you feel after doing that is, oh, wow, that wasn't too bad. And now I don't have to worry about it anymore. So it's like the best feeling ever.
I wish that I didn't have to worry about my stuff. Like one of the things, I did offload some serious shit when I did that first confession. But also, as you were saying, some of the stuff I struggle with is patterns that are deep grooves in my life that keep coming up. So even though I'm a fairly honest person, I think, to people that I trust and to my spiritual leaders, I'll still be like, oh, still dealing with that this week. Yeah. So it keeps presenting itself, which is, I think, really humbling, keeps me humble to let me know that I cannot do this life by myself.
But then I think because you're already thinking that way, you're already winning. And that was the thing I think I learned the most in Rome about the whole bad and good Catholic side, was actually the fact that I didn't think I'm a bad Catholic is already the start. And I'm recognizing where I'm going wrong, because as long as you're recognizing where you're going wrong and you're trying to change it, and it doesn't happen overnight, it's a lifetime. So the fact that you already recognize that you're struggling with the same things each week, you're already winning, because at least you recognize it and you're trying to change it and you're trying to do something about it.
Well, I recognize
so I'll say you're in the right place. Yeah,
it's not I recognize it.
It's not like you're trying to live life saying, "Oh, this is never going to change, so I'm not going to bother." I would say,
or probably more likely for me, like pretending that I don't have any issues. And I do think that, like in my experience of the spiritual journey, and I'm like twice as many years old as you, that God keeps showing me things in prayer, in conversations with friends who are Christian and friends who are not Christian, people all over the map, God continues showing me things that I couldn't have seen 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And some of those things are like, I guess, bad things, not in like I'm a horrible piece of shit, but God shows me things that I need to see about myself in God's time and in God's wisdom. So if God were to have revealed everything in me when I first got sober and came back to kind of a living spirituality, it would have been like, I would have evaporated probably. Like, God does it. You talk about the waves. I think God does it in waves. And in my opinion, out of love, not out of wanting to punish, but out of love, God shows us what we need to see about ourselves.
God tests his toughest soldiers. So just like you explained, I went through them times of where when I was in the army, I was about to end it all because I'd lost so many friends to mental health and suicide. They lost that battle with the war in their mind instead of the war we had trained for. So that really weighed on me. Then at the same time, I had broken up with my ex, who I'd been with 7 years, thought I was going to marry her. Then at the same time, I was deployed. I was sent back off deployment because I was away for 18 months. Then I was jumped, lost my teeth. They tried cutting my ear off. Then I had kidney stones. Then I had infected teeth. So it was I had everything going wrong. But actually now I'm on the backside of it. It's wow. That was just God testing me. God tests his toughest soldiers. And then, like I say, I love to use my faith as my armor now. Every day I just walk hand in hand with it. And the thing that you said, which I love most, is we're not perfect. And I think the first step at becoming a good human is realizing that everyone's poo stinks at the end of the day. So no matter whether no matter whether I'm going to the BAFTAs and being on a red carpet with all these celebs who I look at and think, wow, actually they're just normal human beings too, trying to get by. So I would never say my life or I am a better person than anyone else, but then no one else can say that about you. And it's like the tattoos I have, like on my arm, it says, you know, what God has put together, let no man take apart. No matter how much I build up myself for what I believe in, no one can ever destroy that because I'm so set in stone on what I believe in. And in my hand, it says, be who God has meant you to be and you'll set the world on fire. And that's just like now. The way we're speaking about this and the way my life has changed, but it hasn't changed who I am, because it never will, because like I say, my poo will smell just as bad as yours. So at the end of the day, we're all human.
That's normal. That's normal Harry from Slough, keeping it real. At the end of the day, all of our poo stinks. That's great.
You need to put the Dash Harry Clark 2026 on the end of it.
That's a great line on the red carpet. You've mentioned the gift of the army to you and how it helped you, but also it was a time where you went through some of your, as you just said, some of your deepest, darkest, most difficult lows. You've also talked about the army being the sort of the hammer and the chisel that shaped who you are. What do you mean by that?
I joined the army obviously at 16 and I was a boy in a man's world, so I had to grow up quick. Yeah. And obviously when you go into a world like that, I mean, you really see what man can do to man, you know, and the sort of terrors along the world. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me because, again, I was 16 with all this energy, all these attributes, some good, maybe some bad. So when I went into the army, I say it was like the moulding factory, the stone and the chisel, or whatever they call it, that sort of got rid of all my bad qualities and honed in on all of the good ones. I went through them years of where I was 17, 18, 19, all the way up to 20 of, there's probably not a God. I'll say I believe, but it doesn't really mean anything. I never went church, never really prayed at that time, because it's a simple old age question, isn't it? Of if God was real, why do bad things happen to good people? Why am I losing my friends, or why are they struggling so much? All they needed to do was come speak to me. Like I could have taken that burden from them. And then that's when it started really weighing me down. And then obviously, like I said, I went through them times of where I was deployed for over 18 months and then my whole life felt like it was just going to pot. I come from such a macho man family, but I love it when my friends can come to me and chat to me and cry to me, basically. But I always say my last time I cried was when I was 21. So my 21st birthday, which was the 8th of December 2021, because that was when I had the realisation moment. It was the weirdest thing ever. I'd gone to my mum saying, I feel like a burden on everyone. I don't want to be here anymore. And then that's when she said, just pray. And I'd got to the point of, all right, you know what? I've tried every bloody thing else. Why don't I just give this a go? Because it's like, why not? And this is where I say it didn't happen overnight. I remember when I started praying in this time of my life, I was so angry. Like I'd put an alarm on my phone and I'd start with an hour of where I would just F and blind at God and be like, you're literally just out of order because my mum's believed in you, I believed in you my whole life, but look at me now. Like I'm about to end it all. Why has this happened? Why has that happened? Then as soon as my alarm would go off, I'd think to myself, this is where I was, again, honing in on my skills. I say it's faith, and some people won't believe in faith, but actually at the end of the day I don't really care, because it's what saved me, and it might save someone else out there, and if it does, then my job here is done. So like I said, my alarm would go off and I'd be like, okay, cool, I've just been pissed off with God for an hour. Have I got anywhere? Do I feel any better? No, I actually don't feel any better. If anything, I'm more angry. So it's, what's the point in wasting any more time doing that? So then it was actually though, thank you for what I have. So then I'd move on to like actually thank him for what I had. So thank you for letting me sit on the end of the bed praying. Thank you for letting me be under a roof. Actually, thank you for, if I want to go downstairs and grab a fresh glass of water, I can. Thank you for my family, my mum, my dad, my brothers, my sisters who are around me. Then what I was doing subconsciously was actually realising I'm so lucky to even be in the position I am, how grateful I was for life and how important everything was around me, which is what I now take into every day I live. And then on top of that, I then started just praying for strength. Actually, let me see my little sister's birthday in January. And when I got there, that was a milestone. So like I said, it was like a whole process. And then the alarm of being pissed off and annoyed was coming down. And then my thanks and my praise was going up. And that's where everything changed. I always say this was the change in my life, with my faith anyway, of I no longer prayed to be a millionaire tomorrow or let me win the jackpot on the lottery. It started changing from that to actually thank you and praise, which really made the difference. Even if I do lose my mind, even if I do lose where I'm going, let me regain my step, let me regain the sentence I'm speaking about. So yeah, that was a real change. If I spoke to anyone who's not religious, I would tell them time and time again, I would rather spend 90 to 100 years believing and be wrong than spend 90 to 100 years not believing and be wrong. I'd rather believe and be wrong than not believe and be wrong, because like I said, it's something that saved me. And actually, if I get to the end of my life and I do pass away, none of us know what happens, touch wood, it ain't soon, but if you were there with me and you went, oh, there's no God, do you regret your life now living that there's no God? I would look at you in the eyes and say, no, absolutely not. Because
I feel the same.
Whether there's a God or not, I've lived my life to the best of the ability of loving thy neighbour, loving everyone, being nice and trying to be a good person. So I've lived my life to its best potential instead of being a horrible, nasty piece of work.
I love that. And I sense in you just a real, I don't know you, we don't know each other, but a real sense of authenticity and warmth, that you actually are about love and want to express that for folks. And that's so good. And thank you for walking us through that experience of what it was like for you to pray. I think lots of people have questions about how do you pray? How do you meditate? Are those the same thing? And you just walked us through this first starting off. I love that, like setting an hour and just yelling at God. I actually think that's not a bad place to start, because you're establishing this relationship, right? You're like saying, at least for an hour, you're being real. Like, thanks for walking us through that. I love that. Yeah, how do we do it? And you've just given people a little method for how you can start. You said you come from a really macho man family, and you've been in the Army. I don't want to be stereotypical, but that's the stereotype of the Army, right? Like macho, masculinity sort of pumping through everything. There's been a lot of conversation in the past, especially the past 5 years around, I heard it called, because of Louis Theroux's documentary, The Manosphere, about like where masculinity gets pumped up on steroids, like the toxic masculinity, maybe you've heard it called. And I just wonder, I don't really have a question besides, what's your experience of being like a man I hear you talking about being strong, about being who you are. Then I hear you talking about your friends who are gay. And then I hear you talking about your mom who loved you. So this feminine like strength in your life. What does it mean for you to be a healthy, alive man right now on this journey of life?
Yeah, I think the best way to explain it is funny, because when you speak about macho man, you would say the army and shooting guns and running around a field, or boxing for the army. And like my lifestyle when I was in the army for six years was wake up every day, boxing, and I was just in a ring fighting other people and this and that.
Physicality.
But actually, to me, physicality. But being a man to me is actually doing something, or doing the only thing that makes you happy. For me, the best way to explain it is being a man is being someone who doesn't care what anyone thinks of you. And not even just being a man, but just being a good human being.
Being a human, yeah.
Yeah, being a human. I wouldn't call it being a man, because I don't really believe, like I said, that whole macho manny thing. I do what makes me happy, and I'm going to do that no matter what anyone says. And I think that's the strongest ability any human can have. And I think that's the best way to be. For example, in the 25 years I've been alive, I know I keep leaving you with these motivational stuff, but
that's all right.
The 25 years I've been alive, the best thing I've ever learned is before you win, people will keep asking why you're working so hard. And then when you win, people will tell you just got lucky. So you're never going to impress anyone anyway. So everything I do, even when I was in school, you know, you're never going to be able to join the army because no one from Slough ever joined the army. Then I did. and then you're never going to be able to become a helicopter engineer because there's 11% pass rate. Then guess what? I got my engineering, like aeronautical engineering degree. So I did that. And then I left there, and then, you're the youngest who ever's been on the Traitors, you're never going to win that. Guess what? I did. And then it's the same with the show that's just come out, Harry Clark Goes to Rome. Well, he's never going to meet the Pope, or he's never going to be able to do it. And I like to prove people wrong my whole life, because who actually cares what anyone has to say about you? And I think that's the best version of what people should be, or what people should see when it talks about being a man. It's actually being someone who isn't scared to go on and do what they want to do in life.
What I love about that is I sense that real freedom in you, the sense of I am who I am who God's created me, I am Harry Clark, I'm no one else. But there's also in you, it seems like this really compassionate, soft side of like actually wanting to be there for other people. So it doesn't, sometimes people say, I am who I am, so fuck off everybody else. But you're like, I am who I am, and I want to be available to help other people. And that's a beautiful mix, I think. And
kind of show people, like, it's more, like you said, to be there for other people, to mainly show them too. Look at me, if I can do it, you can do anything. And it's not even in terms of TV and things like that. I'm a kid from a council estate who now is heading his own documentary on BBC One. Do you think this was even an idea 2 years ago? And the best way to explain it is, when I went to Rome, I got this tattoo, a pilgrim tattoo.
Oh, I love it.
I don't know if you can see it. So that's a Memento Mori. And not to make it deep or anything, but...
No, make it deep. I love it. Tell us, what's a Memento Mori?
So that reminds you that at some point in your life, you're going to die. Everyone dies someday. And it's actually quite nice, because I think I've come to that realization so early on when I was 21, 22, that actually life is so worth living, and you've only got one shot at this, and no one can tell you what happens next. So just make the most out of it. So like when we was talking about work and things like that, it's, what should come first is your happiness. Because what even is the point in working? Or if obviously it pays bills, but what's the point in being unhappy and upset? Because no one knows what happens next, and you've only got one chance at this. And to even be here, even for us to be here on a podcast speaking now at this point in time in the universe, is like 1 in a quadruple trillion chance. Like a number you can't even explain. So waking up with your smile on your face is like winning the lottery over a million times. So you should just make the most out of that. And I think I've been so lucky to realise that so early on in my life. So now all I try and do is to show people that too.
We've got a game here, Harry Clark, which is like our version of the Wheel of Fortune. If you were in the studio, we would let you show us your manly strength and spin the wheel. But I'm going to spin it for you. And basically on this wheel, there are some words. And basically prompts, really. It's like playing charades, or playing a game where you get a word and you have to act it out. And this thing, we'll spin it, and I'll spin it for you, and it'll land on an idea, and I'll read it to you. And if you could tell a story, or ask a question, or say what you believe, you can ask me a question. So I'll spin it once. If you don't like what it lands on, you can ask to spin again, but you only get 2 spins. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, cool.
All right, I'm going to give it a good thing here. It landed on
angels.
Oh, we've lost the thing. You can go with angels or AI, friend or foe. Which one do you want?
AI, friend or foe. What, as in to just chat about it as well?
Yeah.
AI's mad, isn't it? Funny enough, you want me to tell you a story about AI?
Go for it.
That actually works as well, because the Harry Clark Goes to Rome documentary, obviously trying to get in touch with the Pope, everything I done was on ChatGPT. So
what do you mean?
So I sent an Instagram message that I typed into ChatGPT, because like I've said, I'm dyslexic. So I sent out a full Instagram message on Instagram. I sent a handwritten letter. I sent an email before I called as well. And that was all from ChatGPT that I asked for it to...
Tell me how to write to the Pope.
Literally, that was literally what I had said as
That's hilarious.
I will see. Wait, let me see if I've got the... Yeah, look, I think I still have it sent. Yeah, look. So I still have the message, the ChatGPT message I sent to the Pope on Instagram.
Can you read it to us? Do you mind?
Yeah. So it says, Your Holiness, my name is Harry Clark. My faith saved me during a very dark time, and now I'm creating a documentary to help young people who feel lost. If I can help even one person find hope, I feel my purpose is fulfilled. I believe this film could be a bridge between the youth and the church today, and it would be an honour to meet you or hear a message from you to include. Thank you for your time, for the compassion you show the world. Know that you are in my thoughts and prayers, Harry.
What a beautiful message that you didn't write.
Yeah, but don't tell anyone that.
I won't say a word. It's only on a podcast.
To be fair, to give myself credit, I had to put in the prompts to
Yeah, of
you know
course.
what I mean?
That's how it works.
I had to be like, oh, add this, add that, take this out, take that out. But yeah, that's my AI friend.
Does AI help you feel more confident?
I wouldn't say confident. I mean, it just helps me in the sense that my English is so bad that if I'm writing something on social media or I need comments or like a post or something, you just type it in, it makes life so much easier. So I guess it's lazy, but I'm so bad at social media, I'm so bad at sending emails that just putting it into ChatGPT and saying, write me this email, you know, everyone probably thinks I'm the most professional person they've ever met. Then they speak to me.
Then they listen to you.
Yeah, they speak to me for half an hour and think, do you know what, have we got the right guy here or is there someone else that we've been speaking to?
That's hilarious. I have to say, I get what you mean about written English or punctuation, but you come across as a really lovely and totally coherent person. So I don't think you should worry about that too much.
That's only because we're on a podcast. If we was in the pub, then you probably wouldn't understand what I'm saying. And also saying that.
What do you mean? Because you'd be drunk?
Yeah, bro. Yeah, I'll be dribbling half the time. But in my defense, how does one even go about messaging the Pope? So it was like, I can't say, yo, what's up? Like, how are you, Pope? You know what I mean? Like, it had to have, that's why the chat.
Yeah, I get it. And especially at the Vatican. One of the things when I was waiting in the queue to get my tickets that I had pre-ordered from the Vatican office to go to the massive rally, I was waiting in the queue, and it was like waiting in a queue in the middle of the 18th century. There were all these people standing there, very formal, all their guards in their classical dress. And we got to the top of the queue, and like, there was like printed envelopes that they had to search through these old boxes for. And I was like, y'all, this could have all been done online. But no, the Vatican's like, no, we have printed envelopes for us. So you had to wait in line, which is great because as I waited in line, it was like waiting in line was a pilgrimage itself, waiting in the queue, because I talked to all these folks who were there for different reasons, atheists, agnostics, Catholics, people of all faiths. It was really interesting. I have to say, I love the Pope, and one of the reasons, I love him for loads of reasons, but one of the reasons is I feel like he's in an ironic way like one of the most badass guys in the world. And I'll say that because I think he's an extremely compassionate guy. He seems like he likes people, which is great. He doesn't seem up himself, which is great. You were saying earlier he's quite humble, but I also appreciate his like chutzpah right now in the world. And this is not even a party political comment. Right now in the world, nobody will tell Donald Trump what they think. But the Pope's, I'm not joining your board of peace, Donald. I'm going to go work with all the migrants in Europe on the day you're meeting. And I think that's a sign of deep spiritual awakeness. So I hope you got to meet the Pope, Harry Clark. And if you didn't, it sounds like it's been a great pilgrimage either way.
Thank you.
Normal Harry from Slough. Thanks so much for being with us this week, and you can see Harry Clark Goes to Rome on the BBC iPlayer. It's been great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Spill the Spirituality is always on with new content every single week, so please subscribe if you haven't already, and please find the time to give us a short review wherever you find us. We are a project of the Methodist Church in Britain. Our producers are John Ryan and Rachel Matthews, and I'm Trey Hall. Until next time, peace.